Alright, what's up guys? Welcome back to another game recap. For this one, I was playing against International Master George Xie. This was round 4, of course. We were both on 3 out of 3 points. And I've played George once before earlier this year. He kind of smoked me in a Austrian Defense where I was black for this game, but we had something like the following where, if I recall correctly, he went for like the fianchetto variation. We had an interesting game. But this time I had the white pieces and I went for 1d4. And this was also the first game, so the morning game of the second day, so I had a little bit of time to prepare. And I looked at a couple different things, but I didn't look at anything like too much depth because George kind of plays everything. So not too much point in trying to invest all your time in analyzing one thing when it probably won't even pop up on the board. But nonetheless, what we had was d5. And after c4, George did not play the Queen's Gambit accepted, he did not play the Slav, he did not play the Queen's Gambit declined, he actually played this move c5, which is known as the Austrian Defense, and it is a little bit dubious, but if white doesn't really know exactly what they're doing, black can actually get a pretty playable position and sometimes even take over the initiative very early on in the opening. But the thing is, right, a couple months ago, I actually recorded a video showing you guys how to beat the Austrian Defense, and I pretty much gave away like what I would play against it if I had to face it myself in a game. So when he played c5, because he played it pretty quickly, I wasn't sure, like, did he like actually come across that video online or something and then like, you know, find a hole in my analysis and like that's why he's playing it, or he's just playing it because he just felt like playing something offbeat and he just happened to choose this opening. But regardless again of which one it was, I had to stick to my guns anyway. I played c takes d5, which is a very logical move because when your opponent plays a move such as c5, sort of playing copycat in the center, one of the most logical ways to try and punish them is to just play a very direct move like, well, in this case, c takes d5. And there is a bit of an option the black has at this point. They can either play knight f6 or queen takes d5. Queen takes d5 is the main option. Again, I had a video where I talked about the Austrian, I talked about knight f6 and how in this position you want to play e4 to gain an advantage. You can check that video out. It will be somewhere in the cards or at the end of the video maybe. But okay, we had queen takes d5. I play knight f3, and after c takes d4, I play knight c3. Just a very clever way of gaining a tempo on the queen, forcing him to probably go somewhere like a5, which is what happened in the game. And after knight takes d4 and knight f6, this is maybe the first interesting moment from like a theoretical point of view where white has a couple different options, but the main one that like a lot of like repertoire books say recommend is something like g3. And for a long time, this is what I played, but I kind of had a tough time after like e5, you know, knight b3, queen c7. There's stuff like I think bishop b4 in this position, after which, you know, generally speaking, black is actually doing pretty well. So not really liking this. It was quite a while ago that I really decided to invest some time into analyzing this whole like Austrian defense thing, trying to come up with some ideas that I actually liked, because most of the stuff that most books recommended, I didn't really like. I thought like all those lines are shit. I want something that's actually good. And so I started analyzing, instead of going g3, just move knight b3. And there is a bit of a crossroads here. Black can either go queen h5 or queen c7. Queen c7 is by far the main move though. Again, I talk about queen h5 in the video I recorded on this. But okay, queen c7 is what happened in the game. And this is again where white has a bit of an option if you play g3 though, which is I think like the most popular move. Again, e5, and I think this transposes to g3, e5, knight b3, queen c7, and I talked about how, again, I did not like those lines too much, which is why I go for knight b3, queen c7, and instead of, again, like a very logical looking move, such as maybe e4, which is, I believe, maybe the second most popular move in the database, which is like very logical, right? You just gain space in the center and play principled moves. I actually play this move knight b5. Which looks like it's sort of breaking the principle, right, of not moving, or rather, sorry, moving the same piece twice early on in the opening, especially since it just looks like black can probably move their queen somewhere, attack our knight, force us to go back, and, you know, like, what was the purpose of our knight coming to b5? It's not exactly obvious. But again, if you've seen my video on the Austrian defense and how to beat it with white, you would know that there's a very concrete idea behind going knight b5, which is basically that no matter where black moves their queen next, like for example e5, white is just going to play e4. our bishop is now protecting the knight, but you guys may sort of be wondering, but what about the e4 pawn? Like, black can take that in two different ways, but the issue is if they play like knight takes e4, well, this loses on the spot to f4. The queen cannot move to a square that keeps in contact with c7, so they're going to be losing to knight c7 check pretty much. And if, say, after queen takes e4 check, we can just play bishop e2, and again, they have to defend against knight c7, and after knight a6 castles, white's going to play something like bishop f3, bishop e3 next, and attack the a7 pawn, and black cannot play b6 because, again, bishop f3, and we're going to be skewering them pretty badly. So, like, while knight b5, it may not necessarily be a refutation of this whole line, it definitely does make things very unpleasant, and if, like George in this game, you are not aware of what exactly you're doing, you might just end up losing, like, straight out of the opening, which, unfortunately, as for my opponent happened in this game, sort of was the occurrence where he played queen b6, which looks like a very logical looking move, right? Just attacking the knight, getting out of the attack. But unfortunately, I think this is one of the worst queen moves because, again, after e4, which is our whole idea, we're probably going to play something like bishop e3 next, which is very convenient for us because it helps us develop a piece and also attack the queen with tempi. And again, it's also worth noting that knight takes e4 does not work tactically because we're just going to play queen c2 in this case, attack the knight. If the knight moves somewhere, then we get knight c7 check again, and this is pretty devastating for the black pieces. So that's why after queen b6, what we end up having was e4, knight g4. Well, I'm not sure that's why is a good explanation. Knight g4 is actually a bit of a strange move. Okay, he's sort of stopping me from playing bishop e3. He's attacking my f2 pawn, obviously. And I believe my opponent had a very sort of concrete idea behind going into this whole variation, which is now that if I play something like queen c2, which I did in the game, I was also considering something like queen d4, you know, protecting f2 and also counterattacking my opponent's queen, sort of forcing the queen exchange and now forcing him to go knight a6 probably to cover the c7 threat. But basically my argument would be if I did go into this, I just have a much better endgame, my pieces are more active, your knight's sort of stuck in the room defending against these threats again. But I thought during the game that this move wasn't the most convincing thing in the world. I felt like I could probably get more out of the opening in a good endgame, given my opponent's sort of subpar play, I felt. So again, that's why I went for the sort of thematic idea of queen c2, and I wasn't exactly sure whether knight c6 or knight a6 would happen. My opponent went knight a6, this was his concrete idea, where after h3, his plan was to go bishop d7. He didn't want to retreat because, like, you know, then I gained a tempo of bishop e3, and this could get pretty bad pretty quickly, where, like, you know, I might get, like, another tempo of rook d1, and again, this is looking pretty bad for black, which is why in the game after h3, what he ended up doing was he played this intermediate move, bishop d7, and he played it very quickly as well, and I should note, like, the time usage was, like, pretty much like I booted out these first 8 moves, he forwarded a little bit for queen b6, I played e4 pretty quickly, he spent a little bit of time, played knight g4, and after queen c2, he played these 2 moves quickly. And first, you know, your instinct when you're playing a stronger player is like, okay, he's probably figured something out, like if I take, he takes back, he wins back the piece, right? And he can't be tween, and maybe he's not doing too badly. But then I was like, is that actually true though? So I started calculating a little bit. So I was like, okay, let's say like after bishop d7 here, I take, he plays bishop takes b5, I gain a tempo of bishop e3, that's the most logical move in the world. His only way to like sort of not lose his queen and also protect the bishop on b5 at the same time is to play queen c6, where he is now creating some tension between the queens. If I just take his queen, he probably takes back bishop takes c6 and he's probably not doing too bad. So I was like, okay, let's go through this variation again, h takes g4, boom, 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 and now I was like, okay, what do I do here? Because again, if I just exchange queens and stuff, he's really not doing too badly. I actually have double pawns as well. Okay, granted, I have the open h file to sort of compensate for that, so maybe it's not too big of a deal, maybe that's even good for me, but it's definitely not what I wanted from the opening, that sort of, you know, exchange of queens and whatnot. But then I noticed a nice tactical detail in this variation where after takes, again, I'm going through this whole variation for the millionth time, I realized I had a nice detail in that I could play knight d4, forking the queen and bishop now, and if queen takes c2, I played bishop takes b5, an intermediate move, sorry for the arrow there, give him a check, and while he's in check, his queen on c2 is also hanging, because my knight on d4 is attacking the c2 square. And putting this on the board briefly, if he does try to go into this, right, and play like, let's say, queen c6 at the end of the variation to block the check, well, this doesn't really do much because I just take, and either of these captures looks pretty good and white is pretty easily winning. So after this move, bishop d7, h takes g4, Despite my opponent's last move being played very quickly, right, with the clear intention to take on b5, I think he realized at this point that he sort of screwed up a little bit, and that because of the knight d4 idea, he simply cannot play that variation. It's going to be a queen piece down. So he actually started thinking here a little bit too late, unfortunately, and ended up playing knight b4. In the game, I was also thinking of like maybe rook c8 to try and create an in-between attack on the queen, but I realized pretty quickly I can just play knight c3, coming backwards. Again, I'm a queen piece up. Knight b4 doesn't really do much. I just play a queen d1, bishop e3 next, and probably kick his knight out eventually, something like a3. But again, yeah, he played knight b4, but this doesn't really do a whole lot. At first I was thinking, oh, I might have to go like queen e2 or something and play passively, but then I realized like, I don't even have to play passively. I can just go forward, attack his knight, still thread knight c7 check, all while, again, of course, obviously protecting this guy. So I was just very confused what was happening, and then I was more confused when my opponent played rook c8 and allowed me to be not just one piece up, but two pieces up. And then we, played some moves. I made some exchanges. I tried to force him to move his rook and exchange queens. And again, my idea is like, if he's move rooks, I'm going to play knight c4, attack his bishop, it moves away, and I exchange queens. So he did not allow that. He played queen takes g4 instead, and took on g2, very scary. But after queen h3, he just resigned, since there's not really much he can do. He's forced to make the exchange, or he goes backwards and gets mated, right? So that was pretty much his game, right? He, again, resigned after this position occurred. And after this game, I was on 4 out of 4. But, like, yeah, just a really weird game, right? Like, I don't think I've ever beaten IM, like, with this little effort, really. It's just, at the end of the day, it really came down to my opponent playing, like, a sideline, which is somewhat dubious. I happen to know exactly what to do. Like, this wasn't anything I prepared. I don't think he has any games in the database with it. But, because I sort of made the video on it, I analyzed it before, and I had a sort of rough idea of maybe not, like, all the exact concrete details, but I at least remembered, like, okay, I go knight b5 here, regardless of where the queen goes, I sack a pawn with e4, probably like sacrifice, right? Because if they take it, it's just sort of losing, But like, honestly, right, like I didn't do anything special this game. I just, played some theory, or at least not really theory, because I think knight b5 is being played like maybe a handful of times in the database, But I had some good preparation. My opponent didn't, so I won the game pretty much. Nothing, again, too special. But anyways, while I would love to drag this video out for another 20 or so minutes talking about all sorts of random stuff, that is pretty much all I have to say for this one. If you liked it, of course, please leave a like on the video and also subscribe to the channel for more content like this, I guess. But yeah, anyways, also check out the video I made in the Austrian Defense a couple months ago. You can also be international masters as well if you watch that video. Maybe, maybe not, we'll have to see. But yeah, anyways, hope you guys have a good day.